These little toys are addictive. Once you start playing with them, you just can't stop. They're fun and inexpensive to make. I'm going to show you how to do it. So here's the material that I just cut that I'll be using to make these toys. And yes, I cut them out of a 2x4, a piece of a 2x4 stud that I had left over. And as you can imagine, you can get probably a dozen or more of these toys out of a single $2 or $3 stud. A piece of wood for the bodies is 1/4 of an inch thick, the width of a 2x4, about 1.5 inches. And the piece of wood for the handles are 3/4 by 3/8. Now if you don't have the tools to slice up a 2x4, that's okay, you can still make one of these. If you go into your local hardware store and ask them for a piece of non-pressure treated lattice, a single piece, you'll be sold something very similar to this, about the same dimensions, and a piece of sash bead is about the same size as this, and you'll be able to use that for the handles. And then you could cut the whole thing out with a coping saw. That's not how I'm going to do it today, but I've done it that way in the past. So let's lay these things out. So here are the pieces for the toy, and in the last part of the video you saw me putting this handle piece together. Now the concept for this toy is probably over 100 years old, And in some of the old instructions you'll see that it will tell you to use a nail to hold this cross piece to the rest of it. But a long time ago when I started making toys, I decided that if possible I was not going to use any nails or screws in my toys, for obvious reasons. Should this toy get broken, I don't want there to be a piece of wood laying on some child's floor with a sharp nail sticking out of it. So as you saw, what I usually do for these toys is drill a 1/4-inch hole through the handle pieces and in the end of the cross section. Then using glue and a 1/4-inch dowel I peg the whole thing together. This works really well. For the same reason, I don't use wire to hold the joints together, and I came across the idea when I first started making these to just use string instead, and that's what I'm going to do. But before I do that, I will say that of course you can paint these in any way that you like. The one in the beginning of the video I have painted like a turn-of-the-century Victorian Acrobat, handlebar mustache and all. But you don't have to paint them if you don't want to, and you can leave them just wood. You could put a coat of shellac or mineral oil on them, or just leave them plain, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I'll start by taking a piece of string. This is just ordinary cotton string, cutting it longer than I think I'm going to need. I've wet my fingers and wet the end of this just to make it easier to push through the holes, and start threading it. Make sure you have the feet facing in the right direction. You don't want to get it all together and find out you have his legs on backwards. And if you're having trouble threading it through, you can use a doll needle to do this. Once it's through, you want to tie a good knot, and it has to be large enough so it won't go through the hole, so I usually tie it 2 or 3 times. Make it as big as possible. And tie a knot very close to this leg, which can be tricky, but it's not as hard as it sounds. Just keep pushing the knot down closer and closer to the leg. Doesn't matter if it's a little tight, you just don't want it too loose, because if it's too loose it'll flop around a little too much. And again, you'll want to tie it more than once just because you don't want it going through the hole. Do the arms in the same way. So now we just need to connect the man to the handle. And this is what makes the whole toy work. So again, we want a piece of string longer than we think we'll need. Now the thing you want to remember is if you put it through the top hole in the handle, you want to put it through the bottom hole on the little man's hands. And then make sure that you go back through the top hole on the other handle. Then of course you'll have to go back through the bottom hole in the handle, in the top holes in the hands of the little man. And it's this crisscross action that makes it so that when you squeeze the handle, the string wants to straighten out, and that's what spins the little man around. Now sometimes I put a little wooden bead in between the man's hands just to keep them an even distance apart. I'm not going to do it in this case, and it's not absolutely necessary, but you can do it if you want to. Of course, make sure you tie it off. So here's our little Acrobat man, ready to astound and entertain. And you don't have to make little Acrobat men. It could be a little Acrobat woman, or a monkey, or a cat, or a rabbit, or anything else that you can think of. And if you have a lot of children to make gifts for, it's pretty economical as well. If you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you for watching.